So this is an emergency video. This is not the video I wanted to post today. There's not going to be any dramatic music, there's no stories, there's no intro, and there's no sponsors. Now, I might have titled this video something sensational to grab your attention, but that was on purpose. Because when the world feels like it's on fire, it's important to stay calm and level-headed. And right now, there's a serious conflict between countries. There are casualties, there's going to be scary headlines, scary news reports, and the markets are going to be on fire. The world is afraid of World War III. So I just want to take a moment to slow things down for anyone who's feeling worried or overwhelmed, because when people are losing their lives, the last thing they probably want to think about is money. But when fear takes over and markets do crazy things, we can make mistakes, especially with our finances. And as someone who's really passionate about helping people and sharing financial education, I think this is the right time to put out this reminder about staying calm, staying invested, and staying smart. So I wanted to interrupt my normal schedule. This is not the video I was going to release today, but I want to share a few things that I think are incredibly important right now that will hopefully help you out. This information I'm about to share is something I've spent a long time researching, because this is not the first time the world was in danger of global conflict. And it's definitely not the first time that investors asked, what happens to the market during war? And I think the answer might surprise you. Historically, markets don't crash the way people expect during major conflicts. In fact, in a lot of cases, they actually recover really fast, sometimes even going up during the war itself. But let me give you a couple examples. After Pearl Harbor in 1941, the stock market dropped about 3% the next day and then fully recovered within a month. All it took was 1 month to recover from one of the biggest conflicts in the US. Now, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, which happened in 1962, when the world was literally on the edge of nuclear war, the market went down about 7% in about 4 trading days. And then it recovered in just 10 to 12 days. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the S&P 500, that's the stock market, this ETF right here, VOO, the market dropped 2.6% on the day of the invasion. But within 1 month, the market had already bounced back and it was trading higher than before the war started. In other words, fear tends to hit the hardest before the worst case scenario happens. But once that fear turns into reality, once the thing the market is afraid of happens and the uncertainty is gone, the markets usually stabilize and they go back up again. And I know that sounds weird, but it happens because investors hate uncertainty more than anything else. Once the future is clear, even if it's bad, the markets start moving forward again. So if you're watching the headlines right now thinking, should I sell everything? Should I go cash? Should I wait for things to get better? Please hear this. Trying to time the market around a war almost never works. Let me give you a few more examples, and this time I'm going to show you the actual data behind what I'm saying. In 2008, during the biggest financial crisis of my lifetime, the stock market dropped almost 57%. It felt like the whole system was collapsing. Banks were failing, homes were being foreclosed on, people were losing their jobs. It was really bad. But if you held on through the worst of it, the market ended up tripling over the next decade. In fact, in the first 3 weeks after the market reached its bottom, the market was already up over 20%. After 9/11, the market was closed for almost a full week. And when it reopened, the S&P 500 dropped roughly 11.6% in 5 days. The Dow dropped about 14%. That was one of the worst weeks in market history. But even then, stocks recovered most of those losses within 2 weeks. In 2011, when the US had its credit rating downgraded for the first time in history, the market dropped over 6% in just 1 day. People thought that was the beginning of the end. But within just 6 months, the market had recovered everything it lost and then some. Even the COVID crash in 2020, which was the fastest crash in history, the S&P 500 dropped 34% in just 33 days. But within 5 months, the market fully recovered and we went on to hit new all-time highs. And it just keeps going. Back in 1987, we had something called Black Monday. I wasn't around for that. It was about 2 years before I was born. The market dropped 22% in one day. And to this day, that is still the worst one-day percentage drop in all of US history. Imagine the S&P 500 falling over 1,000 points in just one trading session. Put yourself in that position for a second. People thought the whole system was breaking. But here's what happened next. Within 2 years, the market not only recovered, it doubled. In 2011, during the European debt crisis, global markets were under super heavy pressure. Countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain, they were facing what's called a default. They couldn't pay back their loans. There was real actual fear that the euro would collapse. The S&P 500 dropped about 20% during that summer. But over the next 12 months, the market went right back up and even reached new highs. Here's another. After the Russia and Ukraine war that started in 2022, markets dropped immediately. Oil prices went up, gold went up, stocks went down, and that is in lockstep with what just happened the moment this crisis broke out. But within just a month, the S&P 500 had already recovered those losses. And sometimes people think Bitcoin is going to do the opposite, it's going to go up. But no, even Bitcoin dropped 8% on the day of the invasion, but then it also came back up in the days that followed and traded higher than where it was before. And to really drive this point home, let me just show you an example with 3 hypothetical investors, and big credit to personalfinanceclub.com, because this example takes 3 investors, Tiffany, Brittany, and Sarah. They all invested $500 a month into the S&P 500 index fund. So this ETF right here. They started in 1985, and they just kept doing that all the way through 2024. That is almost 40 years of investing, over 470 months or so. And through every crash we talked about, all the bubbles, but each of them had a very different strategy of how they did it. And this is going to blow your mind. So Brittany was the genius. She had the best market timing in the world. She waited and waited and only invested at the bottom of every major crash. The day after the lowest point, boom, she invested everything she had saved up until that point. Then there was Tiffany. She dumped all of her savings into the market right before each of the 6 biggest crashes, like the dot-com bubble, the financial crisis, and even the COVID crash. And every single time, she bought at the peak. And then there's Sarah. Now, Sarah is the person that we should all be aspiring to be. She didn't try to time anything. She just set up an automatic $500 a month contribution and never touched it since 1985. Through every up and every down and every month, she put money in the market, and here's how it all played out. Brittany, with the perfect timing, the genius investor, ended up with about $3.3 million. Tiffany, with the worst timing possible, still ended up with $2.1 million. And Sarah, who just stayed consistent the whole way through, ended up as the winner with $3.5 million. So the person who never tried to time the market and was not the smartest still ended up with the most money. How is that possible, right? It's possible because her money was always working for her. And over time, as you put more money into the market consistently, that money grows with compound interest. And then you earn interest on top of that interest, and so on and so forth. But when you try to time the market, especially in the beginning when you don't have a lot of money, even though you're getting a higher return, there's less money to return. There's less compound interest and less time. And Tiffany, even though her timing was really bad, she still did the most important thing. She never sold. She stayed invested in the market. And because of that, even with the worst timing imaginable, she was still able to turn $240,000 into over $2 million. And that's one of the best examples that I've ever seen of why time in the market beats timing the market. But aside all that, here's really the most important lesson in all of this. It's what not to do. Because the worst thing you can do, even worse than terrible timing, is to sit on the sidelines and stay out of the market completely. This chart from JP Morgan right here shows that if you had invested $10,000 into the S&P 500 and just left it alone from 2003 to 2022, your money would have grown to $64,844. But if you missed just the 10 best days in the market over that 20-year period, your return dropped to half, $29,708. Just 10 best days leaves you with half as much money. And if you missed the 20 best days, you're down to just $18,000. Almost no growth at all. And here's the crazy part. The best days usually came right after the worst ones. So if you panic and you sell during a crash, you almost always miss the rebound. You have to be right twice, selling at the top and then trying to buy back in at the bottom. But even if you could do that, which no one can, you still might lose to the person who dollar cost averages because they'll end up with more money over a longer period of time. And that's why there's that famous saying in investing, time in the market beats timing the market every single time. Now, I have no idea what the market is doing today. It could be up, it could be down. I imagine everyone's panicking right now and the market's not doing as well as it would have been without this conflict. But as far as how I'm personally investing, I'm not doing anything differently. I am still dollar cost averaging into the broader US stock market. I'm still holding on to my real estate, holding on to my cash, and I'm still buying Bitcoin whenever there's an opportunity. But as far as World War III is concerned, not that my opinion matters, I'm no geopolitics expert, but I am optimistic, and I don't think we're going to get World War III over what's happening right now. That's because I don't think Iran has enough full support to start one. China and Russia are too busy with their own problems. Russia is busy with Ukraine, China's busy fixing its own economy, and the US is just trying to stay out of geopolitics. And I'm hopeful, and I'm looking on the bright side, but the ultimate takeaway is that you don't need to do anything fancy, you just need to not panic. So I hope this video helped you out a little. As always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to see you back here next week with my regular video. With that said, I'll see you soon.